Greetings all, and welcome to the Developing the Leader's Mind elective, where we will be discussing not only growth mindset and grit and adversity quotient, but today specifically adversity quotient and how to overcome adversity. I'm only smiling because I'm planning on teaching about 70 minutes today. I just finished teaching you 70 minutes, and when I went back to listen to the audio recording, there's no audio. So we're back teaching class once again. Here we are. This is me, overcoming adversity, demonstrating some grit, engaging in a growth mindset. Failure means I can learn better how to use the equipment that we're delivering class with. You'll see me sharing my screen, but I'm going to bounce up here a number of different times and make sure that the audio is still right there. See that level? That it's still coming through, because I don't want to do this multiple times. And now I've lost the video, so hold on a second. Let me try to figure out what's going on. Okay, got the video back, still have audio. Here we go. Well, we've been talking about growth mindset, about having a focus of a growth mindset that we can change, that we can grow, that we can develop, that we can continue to see the things that God has for us as it relates to overcoming obstacles, learning from failure, learning from setbacks, learning from mistakes, etc. All critical to our understanding of being great leaders. And that's what we're trying to do, is develop the leader's mind here. Last time we were together, we went through Adversity Quotient, introduced it. It's a book written by Paul Stoltz, Dr. Paul Stoltz. And we were talking about all the beginning aspects of Adversity Quotient. And as we came into the understanding of what does it even mean? How's it different from IQ and EQ? And why is it necessary? One of the great things that we learned was we can develop a better response to adversity, which results in a higher AQ. And that's going to continue to be reiterated in our lesson here today. I really believe that by weaving together a growth mindset, grit, AQ, we're going to be truly equipped to lead at a different level in a different way that empowers people, challenges them, and gives us the mental strength and tools to overcome hardship and adversity when we're facing it. And press forward. You know, it's an interesting time for us to be taking this course. It's an interesting opportunity for me to teach it twice in the same day. I'm filming this in April of 2020, right in the middle of the worldwide coronavirus pandemic. And we're all faced with uncertainty. We're filled with the opportunities to onboard anxiety. There's people losing their jobs by the tens of millions. There's changes coming in every aspect of our lives. And so that could result in us being quitters versus, or maybe we decide we're going to camp versus continuing to climb. But I know that God has called us to be climbers, to be overcomers, to be those who set our face forward and full of faith, make hard choices, but continue to surge past failure and past hardship as we onboard challenge and have minds that are not only calloused, but are really embracing the mind of Christ and overcoming. We're called to embrace James chapter 1 that says, consider it pure joy when you face various trials of many kinds. Well, we're facing many trials of many kinds, various trials. We can consider it pure joy because we're full of faith. And we know that this persevering tests our faith, and the testing of our faith, when it reaches its full effect, means we will be more mature. And the tools that I introduce, Dr. Paul Stoltz, I don't know if he's a Christian or not, but I can tell you this. He's talking about the human mind. He's talking about our capacity to learn and grow. And it's God that created our minds. And it's God that gives us the ability to overcome. And when we're tapped into the Holy Spirit, we combine that with the right choices to onboard hardship, to consider it all good mental training, to callous our minds, to redirect the pathways of our brain toward becoming stronger people, that's going to be glorifying to God. I got to imagine that the forefathers and mothers of the faith faced various trials of many kinds, faced challenging moments, faced difficult decisions. They did that, tapping into who God is in their lives, and then making hard choices regularly in their lives. So we're going to do it. So we get into chapter 3. We will examine the things that we have the opportunity to learn as soon as I unfreeze the PowerPoint. Technology challenges seem to be the order of the day. That's supposed to open a menu. That's not opening. Well, maybe the PowerPoint's working. Here we go. Well, it moved, but then it didn't move. No, hang on. Resuming the recording, but I'm trying to keep this. Maybe I could drop that menu right there so I can always see if, is the mic working? It is. All right. Let's put that back where it goes. Up there, disappear. Okay, continuing on. Here we go. Oh my goodness, you have got to be kidding me. I just got this to work. Let's go back to that. Maybe that's the key. There's the secret. All right, here we go. There are 3 building blocks that make up your adversity quotient. We're going to talk about those 3 building blocks here. The first building block is cognitive psychology. So we're going to talk about the way that the mind works and the things that you're experiencing. Learned helplessness was a revolutionary breakthrough theory of the 20th century that deals with cognitive mindset, cognitive thinking, and cognitive psychology. This theory was introduced by Martin Seligman out of Pennsylvania University. And to discover learned helplessness, he had been working on some experiments with dogs, and he developed a theory called learned helplessness, which has revolutionized the way we think about overcoming adversity, growth mindset, developing grit, etc. In this experiment, I'm going to describe for you the experiment that Dr. Seligman did, and I won't do it 100% justice, but I'll get pretty close. You'll get the idea of what he was doing. He did this through a number of tests that then led to the theory of learned helplessness. In essence, what he did was he took a group of dogs, we'll call them Group A, and he built a shuttle box, or a box about 6 feet long, 8 feet long, 4 feet wide. And down the middle of the box, he built a low wall. So he put the dogs on one side of the box, and he electrified the floor on that side of the box so that the dogs, when he turned on the current, received an uncomfortable current and caused them discomfort. They wanted to get away from it. So the Group A dogs in their shuttle box, when he turned on the electric current, when they jumped the low wall in their shuttle box to the other side of the box, they did not any longer feel the current, and they were thus able to escape from the discomfort. He then took a group of dogs, we'll call them Group B, and he put them in a shuttle box on which both sides of the floor were electrified, both sides of the small wall. So when he turned the current on in that box, those dogs jumped the wall to the other side of the box and continued to receive the current. And it didn't matter what they did, they could not alleviate themselves from the discomfort of the current that was being passed through the floor. That was the end of the first day of the experiment. The next day, he took the Group A dogs and he put them in a box. And on this experiment, he electrified both sides of the floor of the shuttle box, but he added a lever in the box that if they pushed the lever, it would shut off the current. So when he turned on the current, the dogs jumped the wall like they'd done the day before. That did not alleviate their discomfort. Those dogs who the day before had learned that they did have the control to change their circumstances, they continued trying to find ways to alleviate their discomfort and eventually found the lever and turned off the current. And then thus they were able to stop the discomfort. That's the Group A dogs. The Group B dogs, however, were put in the shuttle box, and the electric current was turned on. They jumped the wall. They continued to experience the discomfort. And at that point, they did not any longer try to find a way to stop the discomfort. They just laid down, whimpered, gave up, and took the discomfort. And so through a number of experiments like this, Dr. Seligman developed the theory of learned helplessness, which basically says that you basically give up the control, or you no longer have perceived control over the adverse events in your life. So learned helplessness is about the loss of perceived control over adverse events. It's this idea that I no longer can control it. When discomfort comes my way, when hardship comes my way, when adversity comes my way, there's nothing I can do about it. I'm just unlucky. It's just unfortunate for me. There's nothing I can do to stop it. And so just checking the volume levels, make sure we're still communicating. And so that's what learned helplessness leads to. In this theory, it just started to change the way we think about people and the way they experience life. Learned helplessness describes the power of believing that what one does not make a difference. I can think of many examples of people I know who operate on a spectrum of learned helplessness. I tell them you should maybe work to get a better job. No, it doesn't matter. I'm unlucky. It wouldn't matter what I did. Hey, you might want to take care of your health. Nah, it's just a roll of the dice anyway. Doesn't matter what you do. I knew a guy one time who was super healthy, drop dead of a heart attack, so it doesn't matter what you do. Those statements demonstrate a degree of learned helplessness. What's really interesting and potentially scary is I've seen where learned helplessness at times has crept into my own life, where I think, well, it's just a matter of fate, or it's just a matter of chance. It's not going to make a difference what I do. That is not true. And it's not the mind of someone who's got a strong mind or a mind that knows how to handle adversity well. So I have to stop that and say, no, hold on a second. That's not true. That's not the case. And I'm not going to succumb to learned helplessness. The definitive barrier to empowerment would be learned helplessness. Learned helplessness and empowerment are mutually exclusive terms, meaning you can't embrace learned helplessness and think you're also going to embrace empowerment. You cannot. By definition, they cannot coexist. A person who suffers from learned helplessness cannot be empowered, because as soon as you step in and say, hey, what you do makes a difference, no, it doesn't make a difference. Learned helplessness would be the epitome of a fixed mindset, completely, not a mind state. This would be a mindset. You always have it. Nothing changes. It doesn't matter what I do. It's fixed. It's just how it's going to be. It's a fixed mindset. It's learned helplessness. We want to really work to make sure that we don't go down the path of learned helplessness or allow that cognitive psychology to infect our minds and change the way we think about the future. Learned helplessness is a definite barrier to empowerment, and therefore it's a barrier to your ascent. When we think back to the analogy that Dr. Stoltz is using in this book of climbing a mountain, once you embrace learned helplessness, if you haven't started camping, you will. And if you're camping, you'll quit. You'll stop taking responsibility for your actions. And you'll stop thinking that you have the ability to make a difference in your life or in the events that unfold in your life. Individuals who respond poorly to adversity suffer in all aspects of their life, and learned helplessness is fuel to that suffering. So we certainly want to overcome it. We want to recognize it in our own lives. We want to recognize it in the lives of those we're leading so that we do not end up embracing learned helplessness. Interestingly, there are things that go on in our culture or in our society that actually nurture helplessness in other people. The news is a huge place where learned helplessness is nurtured. You hear a lot of news stories. They did some studies. It's in the book. You can read the book. And by the way, if you haven't read the book, I highly encourage you to get the book, Adversity Quotient, and read it at some point. I know you're busy right now in your lives, but when you get a break, read that book. It's got phenomenal information beyond what I can share in these lectures. In the book, they talk about a study they did of the news. And in that study, let's just check and make sure we still got audio working here. Check. Audio. Yep, still showing that we've got it. In the book, what they showed in these studies is that the news oftentimes gave stories that led to learned helplessness. So you hear the story of the mom who's out in her yard. She looks away and looks back, and her kid tragically ran out on the road and got run over by a car. Tragic story. Yet it leads to learned helplessness with us. You start to think, well, it doesn't matter what I do. I can't be watching my children all the time. I'm helpless. No, that news story leads to learned helplessness, but it's not helpless. It's the reason I would really encourage you to be mindful of how much news you take in, because you start to hear stories about things you cannot control. During this pandemic, I've watched some of my friends almost literally lose their minds because they're so frustrated with the ways things are being handled at a federal level. And I want to say to them, don't get so worked up about that. You can't control that. What can you control? Let's focus on those things you do have control over. That you don't. But if you start to apply that thinking to the rest of your life, it all feels out of control, and you move into a place of learned helplessness. So you want to be careful. The people you're listening to, the news sources you're putting into your mind, not that you shouldn't watch the news, but be mindful. Is this story leading to helplessness, or giving me a sense that I have the control? And interestingly, learned helplessness is about perceived control. So there may actually be times that you don't have control, but if you perceive you have control, it's going to help you take action. And oftentimes it's taking action that changes the circumstances. So it's this perceived control. There is, interestingly, an immunization from hopelessness. And Dr. Seligman saw this in some of the dogs. What was it that made dogs immunized to helplessness, or hopelessness rather, and helplessness? Once they learned they can impact their circumstances, they never stopped trying to impact their circumstances. We're going to get more into that in chapter 6. We'll learn those tools there. The second building block is talks about attributional theory, explanatory style, and optimism. They're all combined together. And so this might not actually be the second building block, but still a part of this first one. In essence, what we're going to talk about is the fact that the way you think, your optimism, is strongly related to and evolving from learned helplessness. The theory is that, let me just read it. Strongly related to and evolving from learned helplessness theory is the idea that a person's success may be largely determined by the way he or she explains or responds to life events. So the way you explain a life event, the way you respond to a life event, it is related to the theory of learned helplessness. So optimists, if you're an optimistic person, you have a less probability to fall into learned helplessness because of your optimistic disposition. Now, if you're a pessimist, you might say, well, I'm just a realist, I'm a pessimist. No, hold on a second. Optimism is an ability to understand perceived control. You can still be a realist and be an optimist. And it's going to impact the way learned helplessness affects you. Carol Dweck, where have we heard her name before? That's right. She wrote the book, The Mindset, that we've already studied. Carol Dweck demonstrated that among children, those who perceived the cause of adversity as stable, meaning fixed, I'm dumb, I'm stupid, I'm unlucky, students who perceived it, doesn't even mean it was true, but they perceived the cause of adversity as stable, learned less than those who perceived the causes as temporary. Like, I didn't try very hard. So think about this. Maybe you have someone who does have a low IQ. They perceived they didn't succeed because they didn't try very hard. They tried harder, they're going to learn more, even if the perception isn't fully accurate. Helpless children focused on the cause of the failure themselves, and mastery-oriented students focused on remedies for failure. So this gets back to learned helplessness and the mindset. When I fail, when I struggle, when I have adversity, am I focused on how to overcome that? How do I remedy the failure? Or am I focused on the failure itself and apply it to me? Big difference. Big difference between a climber and a camper. Big difference between a climber and a quitter. Of course, we want to be climbers. So we're going to keep that focus on remedies for failure, strategies for overcoming failure, steps to grow. Think back to grit when we talked about having high aspirational goals, but if you don't have any steps to get there, you're never going to get there. That's called a fantasy. Same thing would be true here. When I face failure, do I have steps and remedies to overcome the failure? Or do I focus on the fact that something's wrong with me that's fixed that led to that failure? This all is outgrowth of this of helplessness. Dr. Stoltz said, after working with people in dozens of companies, I discovered that individuals who respond to adversity destructively, meaning they have a low AQ, those people suffer. While those with more constructive response patterns, high AQ, those people excel. We're just continuing to lay the case for why we would want to develop a high AQ and why we want to be focused on developing a high AQ. That's what we're doing here. Is we're just laying the case, working through the process, making sure that that continues to take place. Okay, moving forward. From Martin Seligman and others, we learned helplessness explains why many people give up. Because once you learn helplessness, it's easy to justify it. Once you're in that mindset, once you go down that path, it's hard to escape from, and it's easy to continue to justify the helplessness that you're feeling. You start to develop a mentality that says everything's going to go wrong. Pretty soon everything goes wrong. Once learned, and you're justifying it, it's hard to get out of. Optimists, however, respond differently to adversity than pessimists. We've also learned from Martin Seligman and some other researchers that males and females are taught differently. And as a result, they tend to respond differently to adversity. And so it's important as a woman to know, and as a man to know, I might just be responding to this differently based on the way I was taught in elementary school. Thus, I may need to rewire my brain to think differently about adversity and to respond better to adversity. People, this is the things that they learn, and this is helpful. People can be taught to improve how they respond to adversity. I can be taught to respond better. You can be taught to respond better. And together, we're going to actually be taught and learn how to respond better to adversity, which is going to result in some tremendous impact in our lives. Next, Dr. Stoltz started talking about hardiness and the ability to withstand adversity. So hardiness, that kind of toughness, tough mind, disciplined mind, calloused mind, hardiness, ability to do hard things. It's why I'm encouraging you guys to do hard things every day. It's building up your hardiness. You're not this soft person that you get asked to do one hard thing. You're like, well, I can't do it. Oh my goodness, it's 35 degrees outside. I can't go outside and run. No, you go outside and run when it's 10 below, and now you're hardy. You can take it. Or you get up and do a hard thing, or you're learning how to play the guitar until your fingers bleed. Now you're developing that grit and hardiness in your life. Hardiness and the ability to withstand adversity. Hardy people tend to suffer less and for a shorter time. Well, that's what I would want. That's what happens when you discipline your mind, you callous your mind, you take on hardship, you do the hard things, you take the cold showers, you continue to onboard it, you're doing the hard things. Keep it up. Victim or master. Hardiness, like optimism, is a strong predictor of physical and mental health in the face of adversity. It predicts it, how well you're going to do in adversity, whether or not you're hardy. Those who respond to adversity as an opportunity with a sense of purpose and a sense of control, or what Dr. Stoltz calls advertunity, remain strong. So what's the adversity I face today? Man, I have a jam-packed schedule. I have 1,000 things I'm trying to get done. I came in here and I recorded this class and gave it my full effort, full of energy and excitement, got done, downloaded it, and realized there's no audio on the recording. That's tremendous adversity. If I responded to that adversity with a low, victimized mentality, like, why does this always happen to me? I become helpless. I become weak. I couldn't even be back in here doing it. But I didn't. I said, wait a minute. What can I learn? Here's an opportunity to learn. I'm going to learn to do Zoom better. I'm going to learn to download better, upload to my YouTube channel better. I'm going to deliver the teaching better a second time because I just went through all the content twice. I wrote it, then I delivered it, and I'm delivering it again. I've got a sense of purpose. Listen, I'm delivering this content because I want to see you guys develop and grow, and anybody who watches this course in the future, I want you to become better and stronger. And I have a sense of control. I can control what's happening. I can go up here and check, is the mic working regularly through the class? Oh, it still is, and I'm going to keep doing it. Why? Because I want to make sure that I don't make the same mistake twice, but I can overcome. So now I remain strong versus responding low with a victimized mentality and become helpless and weak. This is going to happen over and over and over in our lives every day. In its essence, hardiness, like learned helplessness and attributional theory, is about control or mastery over one's life and the perceived control that we have. And we know that God is ultimately in control, and I submit to his will, but he still expects me to make right choices and demonstrate hardiness and resilience and a growth mindset. Unlike genetics, resilience can be molded. Hey, that's really good news. I want to mold resilience. I want to become a more resilient person than I am now. Am I as resilient as I want to be? No, not yet. Now it's a growth mindset. Those who face and overcome adversity as children appear to fare better later in life than those with less adverse childhoods. Well, guess what? I didn't have an adverse childhood. I kind of think I grew up in Camelot. I had an incredibly wonderful childhood. So now in my adulthood, I have started to build resilience into my life. And I can tell you how the Holy Spirit has done it for me. When my wife had gotten diagnosed with cancer and we were walking through that journey, I started running marathons. And it was amazing to me, the mental strength that I developed running marathons. When the time came to walk through the final chapter of my late wife's life, I had developed some tremendous resilience by running marathons and the Holy Spirit working in my life. So you say, well, was it faith or was it the Holy Spirit? Yes, it was that. It was the Holy Spirit, it was faith, and it was me getting up every day and developing resilience by running marathons. I think it was the Holy Spirit that led me to start running marathons to prepare me for the next chapter of my life that was walking my wife through the end of her life and into heaven, so that I had the mental fortitude to go through that. And so you can develop resilience in your life. Who knows what the Lord is getting you ready for next, but he's going to use you. He wants to use you. And he's challenging you now to grow a strong mindset so that you can demonstrate strength in the face of adversity and lead well in the future. This is where it's going. This is what's going to happen for you. Resilience programs for children are sprouting up across the nation, and it appears AQ may play a pivotal role. The ability to permanently improve how one deals with adversity is fundamental to any child's future. If you know how to overcome, if you know how to get back up, if you know how to stick to it, if you're out there running in the rain, if if you're overcoming the adversity that you face every day, it's going to result in a future life where you're able to be strong mentally. You guys are doing it now. You're going through the hardships. You're facing the challenges. Keep getting up. Keep putting a smile on your face. Keep charging forward. It's developing resilience in your life. Like optimists, resilient individuals possess the ability to spring back from adversity. That's the climbers. That's who we are. That's who we're becoming. We're going to continue to become it. The belief in your mastery over your life and your ability to meet challenges as they arise is what psychologists call self-efficacy. It's yourself being effective. So think about what needs to happen here. A belief in your mastery of your own life. I get to make choices. I'm in control. I'm working in concert with the Holy Spirit. There is no such thing as fate. I don't wish people good luck. I don't think it's the roll of the dice. God's got a plan. He's unfolding it in my life. Hard things that come into my life, he can turn for good. He will turn them for good. He's promised me he's going to turn them for good. It's good for me to go through hard things. I consider it pure joy when I face challenges of many kinds. We can see this in James. You see it in Romans. You see it in the life of our forefathers, mothers and fathers of the faith. We get to grow. We're in control, in concert with the Holy Spirit. We meet the challenges, and thus we are being effective in our lives. Let's keep doing it. Let's keep going down this path. Like the preceding theories, locus of control is about the relationship between control over life events and motivation and success. And that focuses, I have the responsibility. I can't always control my team. I can't control society, but I do get the chance to control me, and me contributing to my team and society will bring about change. And we know that to be true. Okay. So those are the building blocks. Now let's talk about the role that AQ plays in your life. Okay. First role, competitive. Well, actually, we're still in the first building block. We're going to unroll the building blocks as we go. But in this first building block, AQ does a number of things or brings a number of benefits into your life when we're thinking about cognitive psychology, okay? So competitiveness. Researchers discovered that those who responded to the adversity during the Gulf War, they were researching people who came out of the Gulf War, they discovered that those who responded to the adversity more optimistically would predictably be more aggressive and take more risks, where the more pessimistic reaction to adversity resulted in more passivity and caution. Well, why is this important or critical? If we're going to lead well, we need to be ready to be aggressive. There's times where we need to be aggressive and take risk. We can't be passive. Passivity in leadership does not work well. There is a balance between risk-taking and caution. I appreciate that. But as leaders, we need to make sure that we are not exercising caution because we're pessimistic about the future. If we're cautious, it's because we're walking in wisdom and we're taking calculated risk. So we're still taking the risk. Productivity. Seligman showed that people who do not respond well to adversity sell less, produce less, and perform worse than those who do. So, of course, we want to respond well to adversity. How do you do that? You increase your AQ. It's going to lead to better productivity. It's going to lead to better competitiveness. Creativity. Innovation is, in essence, an act of hope, right? If you're going to create something, you have to hope that something is going to exist that doesn't currently exist. You probably have to fail thousands of times when you're creating things. You're going to try things, they're not going to work. You're going to morph, you're going to change. If you have a high AQ, you're going to be able to keep morphing and changing and find failure and succeed through failure because you're looking for techniques to overcome the failure and not thinking that I'm helpless and there's something wrong with me. Creativity, motivation. Without exception, those with the highest AQs were perceived as the most motivated, both on a daily basis and over time. I want to be motivated. I want to stay at it. I want to keep going. There's mornings I wake up that I don't feel motivation. That's where the discipline kicks in and I get out of bed and go do the thing I'm intending to do. But there's many days where because of the high AQ, the motivation is flowing. I like that. I want that. We talked about risk taking. Those who respond to adversity more constructively are more willing to take risk. Improvement. Dr. Stoltz found that those with higher AQ improved. Those with lower AQ did not. Are you a learner or are you not a learner? Are you going to respond well when you get the setbacks in life and the feedback that maybe doesn't feel good? Or are you going to have a fixed mindset and say, well, my focus is really on just performing and making myself look good. I don't even want to take a risk where I don't look good. It's all linked together. It's all tied together. Persistence. Those who responded poorly when faced with adversity gave up. Think about grit. Think about the growth mindset and grit. You're faced with adversity. If you don't have a growth mindset, you give up. You lay down, you stop climbing. AQ determines that the resilience it takes to persevere and to keep going and to keep going and to keep going, responding rightly to adversity and saying, I have control, I'm going to keep going, pressing on. Okay, so in predicting AQ, interestingly, people are not intuitively able to predict how an individual will respond when faced with adversity. You don't predict it well for yourself. You don't predict it well for others. We're not just very good judges of AQ, so it's got to be measured. We're going to talk about some ways to actually do the measuring, and then some ways to listen to your adversity response as you go through life, which will help with that measurement. Mental health. We know that there is a powerful connection between your adversity quotient and your mental health. If you're one that's going to overcome adversity and be motivated and look forward and optimistic, that's going to be a different mental health than if you sink into depression, find yourself feeling helpless and out of control. Now, let me just make a point here very clearly. There are people who wrestle with depression. It's those with a growth mindset wrestling with depression who take action. So it doesn't mean you're not going to have depression if you have a growth mindset and a high AQ. It just means you're going to respond differently to the depression when it comes, and you're going to take action, and you're going to work through it, and you're going to believe it can change, that there is change coming toward the future for the future. Physical health. Pessimists who were healthy at 25 suffered worse health between 45 and 60 years of age than optimists. So we know that optimism correlates with high AQ. So here the study shows that a high AQ is going to result in a healthier life later in life. Praise the Lord. We want that. That's really good to know, especially since we're going to give you tools on how to raise your AQ as we go on in this course. Dr. Nancy Fraser-Smith of the Montreal Heart Institute discovered that among 222 heart patients, those who responded to the adversity of heart disease with depression and anxiety had double to triple the death rate of those who remained upbeat. Optimism here actually saved people's lives. High AQ saved their lives. We're going to want to have a high AQ. Wealth, happiness, and joy. Nothing can sap your vitality, happiness, and joy more readily than walking around with the belief that you have no control over far-reaching, long-lasting adversity. It's going to sap the life right out of you if you think you can't control it or don't have control over it. Certainly, that would be a negative in your life if you thought, I don't have control. It's back to learned helplessness. Okay, that was building block number 1. Now building block number 2. Okay, the new science of health. We're not going to spend long on this building block because we've kind of talked about it already. This building block just basically goes through all the studies that show how having a high AQ is going to lead to better health in your life. We know that there's a direct measurable link between what you think and feel and what goes on in your body. So the way I think actually impacts my health. The way I think impacts the way my body functions. These linkages are proven and they exist. How you respond to life's events can have profound implications for your health and for your ability to ascend. The perception of control over your life plays a central role in the vigor of your emotional and physical health. That perceived control leads to better emotional health. It actually leads to better physical health. A low AQ results in heart disease and depression and sickness. The studies are fascinating. So that is a building block of AQ. The first one is the cognitive psychology. The second one is the science of health. And the third building block is the science of the brain. So we're going to put these blocks together to build a better AQ. Okay? Dr. Stoltz was talking to Dr. Newer, who is a neurologist, and talking about the brain and thinking about how habits are formed. We've probably heard before that it takes 21 days to form a new habit. It's not always true, but there is a science behind how you form habits. Some habits are formed very quickly. Some are formed over time. So Dr. Stoltz was talking to Dr. Newer and asked the million-dollar question. How long does it take to form a habit? The answer, well, how long does it take for you to learn not to touch a hot stove? Dr. Stoltz replied, about a second. Dr. Newer replied, no, actually, it's 100 milliseconds. Dr. Stoltz was stunned. He said, what are you saying, Dr. Newer? Dr. Newer said this, listen, here's the way the brain works. When you touch a hot stove, a loud alarm goes off in your brain immediately, making you keenly aware you placed your hand. That loud alarm is instrumental in interrupting the subconscious thought pattern in the basal ganglia, which is a subconscious automatic region of the brain. It interrupts what's going on in the subconscious and brings it to the conscious region of the brain. This alarm does. Ah, I'm touching a hot stove. That loud alarm immediately from the subconscious is now in the conscious region of the brain. Right? In the anatomy of a habit, Dr. Newer explained to me that learning takes place in the outer conscious region or gray matter of the brain. That region is called the cerebral cortex. That's where learning goes on. Initial learning is a blood and oxygen-rich activity taking place in the cerebral cortex or the gray matter of the brain. Okay, but over time, as you repeat a new thought, which is taking place in the cerebral cortex, that activity migrates to the subconscious or automatic region of the brain so that you automatically do certain things. This region is called the basal ganglia. So when you're trying to develop a new habit, what you have to do is develop new pathways into the subconscious part of your brain. Think about it this way. What would happen if I sent you on a hike that had no blazed trail? How would that affect the speed and efficiency of your hike? If you're on a blazed trail that's marked out, you can walk very fast, it goes very quickly, it's very efficient. But if you're on an unmarked path or you're going on an unblazed trail, it's going to slow you down substantially. The same thing occurs in the brain. When you first start out, the neurological trail is undeveloped. The resulting connections are relatively inefficient. But the more you do or think something, the more efficient those connections become. So as we learn the tools of developing a right response or a high response to AQ, those neural pathways are going to be developed in our mind. And at first, it's going to be slower and it's going to take work. We're going to have to work at it because we're blazing a new way of thinking into our mind. But after a while, that will become more automatic and it will become more efficient in the connections and it will become habitual for us. So as you do or think something repeatedly, your brain adapts by creating denser and more efficient neural pathways in your brain. This is awesome. It basically means there's plasticity in your brain. You can learn new things. You can grow. You can develop. That's outstanding. Based on the research of leading neurophysiologists, here's what we've learned. The brain is ideally equipped to form habits. We are creatures of habit because it makes things automatic. I've asked you guys in one of your extras coming up to take blind showers. The reason it's really hard to take a blind shower is because you're in a habit of just doing everything the same way. And if you can't see, all of a sudden you have to do it a different way. Another thing you could try even tomorrow morning to demonstrate the power of habit. If you normally brush your teeth first, brush them last. What you'll probably find is later in the day, you forgot to put on your deodorant because you did it out of order and you've been doing it habitually for so long that when you interrupt the habit, it changes things. I'll give you an example in my own life. My wife and I, last night, we were just goofing around and decided to sleep on opposite sides of the bed than we've been sleeping on for the last 4 years or 3 years. We've been married about 3 years, for 3 years. And so we're going to sleep on opposite sides. I got to tell you, in the middle of the night, I was all discombobulated. I was like, what's happening? Why? Because I've become a creature of habit sleeping on the side of the bed that I was on. When I slept on the other side of the bed, it just changed the neural pathways and they were all mixed up. Tonight, I'll go back to sleeping on the right side of my bed so I can get back in order. It's the reason we actually have the saying in life, I feel like I got up on the wrong side of the bed. Everything's out of whack. Everything's out of order. It's because we're such creatures of habits. The brain is ideally equipped to form habit. Next thing we learned is that habits become hardwired in the subconscious region of the brain. This is great news. If you can hardwire a habit, it's just there now. I rarely wake up to my alarm anymore because I'm always up before my alarm. My subconscious is hardwired to wake up and go exercise at 5 a.m., 4:30 a.m., 4:45 a.m. I usually wake up at 4:30, and if I don't want to get up until 5:15, I go back to sleep, wake up, go back to sleep, wake up, and I get up at 5:15. You know, that sounds crazy to me, by the way. 5 years ago, if you'd have told me I get up at 4:30, 4:45, 5 a.m. to exercise, I'd have thought you'd lost your mind because I wouldn't have thought I would ever even want to do that. But because I've created this habit now, my body feels so good after I exercise that I look forward to the days when I'm exercising, and I try to take 2 days a month off or 3 days a month off. And I don't even like those days as much because I like how it feels exercising. I've hardwired that into the subconscious part of my brain. Subconscious habits, such as AQ, can be, this is what we've learned, can be immediately altered, readily forming new habits that are strengthened over time. We're going to give you the tools to readily alter that subconscious habit pattern and then form new habits that are going to result in a higher AQ. And we've already talked about all the benefits that are going to come from having a higher AQ. We've talked about them earlier today, and we talked about them last week, and we're going to continue to talk about them. There's just so much benefit that comes from a growth mindset, developing grit, and a higher AQ that you're going to want to keep onboarding this stuff in your life as we go forward. It's going to make you a better leader. It'll help you develop the mind of a leader. So these learnings about habits, well, that's really great when you want to learn a new skill. It's awesome. However, it's kind of bad news when the more you repeat a destructive thought or action, the deeper, faster, and more automatic it becomes. So we want to unhook the bad habits and the bad patterns and the bad thinking. We want to hook in the right thinking, the right patterns, and the right habits as we go forward in our lives. We want to keep doing that. The good news is the more that you repeat a constructive thought or action, the deeper, faster, and more automatic it becomes. So we want the right response to adversity. We want to be reminded of those right responses. We want to challenge each other. It's the reason we're going to develop and want to develop a culture of grit around you. Surround yourself with friends who are growth mindset thinkers and are ready to challenge and move on. It's the reason you jump into the Do Hard Things sessions. The reason you surround yourself with people that are going to challenge you appropriately. It's outstanding. Okay, to unlearn a bad or destructive habit, such as a low AQ, you must start at the conscious region of your brain. That's where you got to begin, at the conscious region of your brain, and initiate new neural pathways. So when we get into the next parts of this book and learning those things that introduce the new habits at the conscious region of the brain, the cerebral cortex, take those on and do them regularly and habitually so that you can start to drive it down into the basal ganglia where your subconscious mind turns it into a habit. This is the science that we're uncovering. It's going to help us, okay? This is the third building block. The first building block, cognitive psychology. The second building block, the new science of health. The third building block, the brain, okay? These three building blocks form AQ. These findings also reveal what you might do in order to immediately reroute your AQ and begin to hardwire your brain for success. We're going to learn how to do that in coming classes. So hopefully you're like, man, I can't wait for the next classes so I can start rewiring or hardwiring my brain in a different way, because that's what we're going to want to do. Now, as we get into learning about our own response to adversity, it's important to measure it, because you can't really very well just discern it. You might think you have an IQ response, really it's a lower, or you might think, AQ response, but it's actually a lower AQ response. You don't know, so we want to measure it. This past week, I had asked you to take an online profile that would help you score yourself relative to AQ. I would love it if you guys would either email me your AQ score or jump on our Facebook group and post your AQ score so we can kind of know where each other needs help and where we can encourage each other. And just know this, as you're doing your AQ scores, those scores, just like growth mindset, they're not fixed. So if your score was a bit lower, you're on a continuum of AQ. You're not gonna just categorize yourself as high or low. It's gonna depend on the various adversity that you face, the kinds of adversity you face. It might even depend on the day. I might have a higher AQ on some days and lower on others, and I got to start listening for how I'm responding so I can change the way that I respond to adversity, okay? So they're not just simply categorized as high or low, rather they fall on a continuum. Even if your adversity quotient is very high, you'll find ways to better understand and fine-tune your responses for success, okay? When you go to interpret your AQ, whatever your score is, and by the way, if you were thinking, I don't want to post my AQ score on the Facebook page, other people will see it. Careful you don't get caught in a fixed mindset. We're not trying to impress each other, and you're not trying to look good. That's the focus of a fixed mindset. A growth mindset says, hey, if my AQ score is a 59, here's what it is. I need help. I got to change this thing. Let's do it. Okay? So don't worry about what it looks like. General descriptions of people whose AQ fall within different ranges. These are general statements meant to help you learn more about yourself. So I'm going to give you some statements for those ranges, okay? There's not really a discernible difference for someone that's 134 versus 135, so you don't have to worry about that, but you're going to want to start looking at this and learning from it, okay? So here we go. Go look at your score. If you scored like 166 to 200, if your overall AQ is in this range, you probably have the ability to withstand significant adversity and continue to move forward and upward in your life. Yeah, I mean, there's a very high AQ response score. You can use the tools found in the book to continually hone your climbing skills and to teach others in your life how to prevail. But you're like you're overcoming adversity all day long. Woo, you're rocking and rolling. I want you on my grit culture. I want you in my club. I want you standing around me to help me increase my score. If your score is like 135 to 165, your AQ falls within this range, you probably do a fairly good job of persisting through challenges and tapping a good portion of your growing potential on a daily basis. It's a good score. You're doing great. You can increase your effectiveness by fine-tuning certain aspects of your adversity quotient, your response to adversity, but you're doing great. You're climbing. You're going for it, okay? If your score was 95 to 134, you usually do a decent job of navigating life as long as everything is going relatively smoothly. However, you may suffer unnecessarily from larger setbacks or may be disheartened by the accumulated burden of life's frustrations and challenges. Don't panic. You can increase your AQ score. It's going to get better, okay? But right now, what happens for you is you probably get into big adversity. It starts to really overwhelm you. Or remember the 3 levels of adversity, whether it's society or your team or yourself, and the weight of the society and the team and the adversity that you're all facing starts to weigh you down. You're like that adult laughing 17 times versus the child laughing 300 times. But there's tools that are going to help you overcome adversity, and we're going to get into those, right? 60 to 94. You are likely to be underutilizing your potential. Adversity can take a significant and unnecessary toll, making it difficult to continue your ascent. You may battle a sense of helplessness and despair. You can escape this conundrum by raising your AQ, but you're going to have to go to work at it. You probably have some pathways developed in your mind that are very unhealthy. We're going to identify those, and we're going to learn how to overcome them and change them. But you're going to want to take action. You are in control. Just remember that. If you have a score lower than 59, you probably suffer unnecessarily in any number of ways. You can change your life dramatically by raising your AQ. We're going to get into that. Okay, so that's those scores. Now, the score that you actually post, there's a core dimension of your AQ, and I want to get into the core here to help you understand. So that AQ is the overall score, but there's core things that make that up. Okay, it's comprised of 4 core dimensions, and they start with CORE. So core is easy to remember. CORE. C. These would be great final exam questions, by the way. C stands for control when it relates to AQ. It asks the question, how much control do you perceive that you have over an adverse event? Perceive being the key word here. Remember that. Perceived control is far more important. Control strikes directly at empowerment and influence and impacts all the other core dimensions. When Mahatma Gandhi changed the entire culture of India, his entire campaign against the British Empire depended on one thing: his ability to alter the Indians' perceived control over their oppressors. They felt powerless. They felt they didn't have control. They had learned helplessness. Gandhi helped them to understand, no, we have tremendous power. We have control. When they harnessed that, they threw off the entire British Empire. So it's this concept of control. Now, I can't overstate it. In fact, it begins with the perception that something or anything can be done. It's difficult to overestimate the power of perceived control. If you don't have the power, if you don't have perceived control, hope and action are crushed. If I think nothing I do makes a difference, I'm crushed. With it, lives can be transformed and destiny is fulfilled. And without it, you're left helpless. I'll give you an example. I tweaked my hamstring again out running the other day. You guys know I've been dealing with this hamstring injury since last fall. If I got to the place now where I just felt like I just don't have any control over when my hamstring's going to blow up and when it's not, then I just become powerless. I might as well just lay down and take it. But I know that I have perceived control. I can do a new rehabilitation plan. I can swim. I can bike. I can lift. I can do core exercises even though my hamstring's injured. I'm going to still do a hard thing session with the students later this week. I'm going to stay exercising. I'm going to continue to pursue fitness. I can eat well. That's all control. I still have control over my physical health, even though my hamstring is acting up. I don't know why it keeps doing what it's doing. I keep doing research on how to rehab it. I'll rehab it again for like the 5th time. I'm going to stay after it because I'm in control. It doesn't control me. Okay? So what does C stand for? That's right, control. And this would be a good time to check and make sure the mic is still working. Check, check, check. Still working. Still got you. Okay? O of core stands for origin or ownership? It asks two questions. What or who was the origin of the adversity? Where did it come from? And to what degree do I own the outcomes of the adversity? Okay? People with lower AQs tend to place undue blame upon themselves for bad events. A fair and accurate degree of self-blame is required to create the critical learning or feedback loop needed to continuously improve. So when I think about the ownership and the origin, think about this. If I'm on a long training ride on my bike, and I actually was once, the day that I was to officiate Derek and Molly Brocky's wedding. Okay, I'm supposed to be the officiant at that wedding. I decided to go on a training ride that morning. I'm out on a training ride, boom, I get a flat, okay? Or in England, they'd say a puncture. And the tire went flat, I get off the bike. I'm 10 miles from home, I don't have a spare, and I don't have a cell phone. And I got to get home quickly to get changed, cleaned up, and off to the venue for the wedding, which was on campus. Okay, so I'm like, oh my word. Now, is that adversity? Absolutely, that's adversity. I need to ask myself the question right here. Who or what was the origin of the adversity? Well, you could say the flat tire is the origin. Yes, okay? To what degree do I own the outcome of that adversity? Well, I didn't take a spare with me. Maybe I didn't put enough air in the tire to begin with when I left. I don't have a cell phone. I may not have left myself time should all these things happen to get to the ceremony. I have to own that part of it. I have to own that. That's on me. That's not on somebody else. And a fair and accurate degree of self-blame is required to create the critical learning or feedback loop needed to continuously improve. So I say, look, there is self-blame required for me. I should have had a backup plan. I should never have gone on a trading ride without a spare tire with me. I should have brought a cell phone. I should have told my wife, if I'm not back by a certain time, you better come get me. I should have told her what my path was that I was going to take on the training ride. Okay, I should own all that. But it's important to not put undue blame upon myself for bad events. Not to now, oh, what is the matter with me? Why am I so stupid? Now I'm away from home and I don't have a tire and I'm walking in my bike shoes. It's hard to walk. This is ridiculous. How can this happen to me? What's the matter? Lay down on the grass and start crying. I wouldn't have made it to the wedding. What I did do was say, okay, I got to own this thing. Now I'm in control. I should take action. This is the action that I took right here, standing on the side of the road. Actually, I was walking because I thought if I don't get picked up, I better be hot-footing at home. So I'm running along the road with my thumb out. Thankfully, a guy stopped, picked me up, took me home. I went to the wedding. Okay? So I got there on time. The self-blame was required for me to learn from it. What did I learn? I should carry a spare tire with me. So now when I go on long training rides, I carry spare tires with me, 2 of them. When I did the Ironman, I carried 5 of them because I thought on this 112-mile portion of the Ironman, what is not going to set me back is a flat tire or 5 flat tires. I'm going to have plenty so that I can get through this. Why? Because I'd learned from the time that I'd had adversity in the past and it impacted and affected my future. Okay? So I have since then gotten stranded on one long ride. I had 3 flats. I didn't have enough spare tires with me, but I brought my cell phone. So now I learned from that too. My wife came and got me and I made it home. Okay? So what's C stand for? Control. I'm in control. Perceived control. Okay, O stands for origin and ownership. I should own the adversity, but only as much of it that I should own. I don't need to own more of it, and that's where R comes in. R stands for reach. The R dimension asks the questions, or the question, how far will the adversity reach into other areas of my life? Lower AQ responses allow the adversity to bleed over into other facets of one's life. A bad meeting becomes a ruined day. The DirecTV commercials kind of used to do that. I don't know if you remember the old DirecTV commercial. I didn't get DirecTV, so I got bored. So I went to the store. So I met a guy. So he beat me up. So he threw me in a ditch. So I better have DirecTV so I don't wind up in a ditch. Okay, that would be adversity extending way into your life where it doesn't need to go. When I got to the wedding to officiate Derek and Molly's wedding, had I gotten there and been frustrated and mad that I was rushed and frustrated that I didn't have a relaxing morning, that would have been allowing the adversity to reach into other areas of my life that it does not need to reach into. There's nothing that said the adversity that I experienced that morning had to reach into my afternoon. But you've all met people with a low adversity response. They have one bad thing happen and it ruins their whole day. It ruins their whole week. They have a bad meeting and the whole month is ruined. They have one bad conversation and it's their whole career. they're down and you're like, what's wrong? I'm going to flunk out of school. Why? Because I failed a test. Hey, you failed one test. There's nothing that says that that adversity has to reach into the rest of your collegiate experience. And so with a high AQ, we're able to determine how far the adversity should reach or needs to reach, and we're able to keep it in the range where it should be. People with a low adversity response are the ones that come home after a long day of PT, maybe with your roommates or your family if you're working now. You come in, you kick the dog, you're yelling at people because you had a bad day at work. There's no evidence that adversity at work has to carry into your home. And we have to become great at saying, what's the reach? Let's stop it there. Okay? What does C stand for? Control. What does O stand for? Origin, ownership. What does R stand for? Reach. These are great final exam questions. E stands for endurance. It asks two related questions. How long will the adversity last? And how long will the cause of the adversity last? The lower your E score, the more likely you are to perceive adversity and or its causes lasting a long time, if not forever. You get this perception that nothing will ever change. I'm always going to get flat tires on rides. My hamstring's always going to pull. The economy's always going to be bad. Raising funds for global internship is never going to work. I'm never going to be smart enough to pass this class. This video's never going to end. Whatever it is, if you have a low response to adversity, you think it's just going to go on and on and on and on. But that is not true. And so for those of us with a higher adversity quotient, or myself trying to build and develop a higher adversity quotient, I ask the question, how long will the adversity last? And why does it have to last any longer than it does? I don't have to let it last any longer. And I can change the cause of the adversity. If it's my hamstring, I can rehab my hamstring. I can stretch better. I can run slower. There's things that I can do. I can change the cause of the adversity because I'm in control and I've examined the origin and I've taken ownership of it and I've determined its reach and thus the endurance. So these are the four core aspects of your overall adversity quotient score. And as you get better at responding to adversity, you're going to get better at understanding where this score impacts and where it doesn't, where it impacts rather, and what tools you need to bring in to do what? Change the cerebral cortex thinking in your mind, get into your basal ganglia, develop new habits that are going to impact and change your life. So this is what we're going to get into as we go forward. Now, I've asked you to do some supplemental questions. They're there in a Word document. I want you to do those supplemental questions because they're going to help you learn more about your own adversity response, and it will make better use of the tools as we go forward in the course. Hopefully the audio has been working the whole time. I'm going to check it one more time. Checking the audio. It's still working, so I'm hopeful this is all going to work out for us, and you're going to be able to learn as we've done now chapters 3, 4, and 5 this week together. Look forward to hearing your responses to the AQ and doing well together.